And now, in tribute to former Deputy Prime Minister Lord Prescott, whose death was a year ago this week, and to the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Charles Kennedy, who would have celebrated his birthday this week had he not drank himself to death. We take a look back at Lord 2 Jag's finest moment. This programme contains flashing images.
The election campaign turns nasty. John Prescott is involved in a violent clash with a protester in North Wales. Confrontation 2 for Tony Blair on the day he set out his vision for Labour's second term. The former royal aide Jane Andrews has been found guilty of murdering her boyfriend. This is BBC News 24. I'm Peter Dobby. Good evening. It was supposed to be a day dominated by Tony Blair's vision for Labour's second term in government, but it was overshadowed by quite extraordinary confrontations. In Mr. Blair's case, it was a verbal lashing at the NHS. Then his deputy, John Prescott, was involved in a brief fight with a protester as he arrived to address a Labour rally at Rhyl in North Wales. Eggs were thrown, fists flew, and one man has been arrested. Pictures appeared to show that Mr. Prescott threw the first punch.
John Prescott was heckled by farming, fuel and steelworks protesters from the minute he got off his campaign bus. And then, completely out of the blue, verbal assault turned to serious physical violence. Looking at the pictures again in slow motion, you can see the sequence of events unfold into a vicious scuffle. The Labour Party has issued a statement saying the Deputy Prime Minister was attacked and defended himself, as anybody would in these circumstances.
I support your cause. I've listened to you every time you wanted. What you've just done today, you've let yourself down badly. You've behaved like animals.
As far as the events at Rhyl were concerned, the guy shouldn't have thrown the egg, and the Deputy Prime Minister shouldn't have reacted in the way that he did. None of us is perfect, but both of them have to now be dealt with by the law in the usual way.
Finally, this formal statement from Mr. Prescott himself.
I got off my bus into clearly a hostile crowd. I walked through all the jostling, and I was attacked by an individual. In the melee that followed, I clearly defended myself. I believe someone is now being questioned by the police, and it would be quite improper for me and quite wrong to add any further comment.
What should have been a positive day for Labour has entirely departed from script. Intended to be about political vision, it may end up with criminal charges instead. Philippa Thomas, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Labour's best laid plans had come unstuck when Tony Blair was berated over his health policies by an angry woman at a hospital in Birmingham. And the Home Secretary was heckled and jeered by the Police Federation. All of it took the spotlight off the manifesto itself, unveiled by Mr. Blair with his cabinet at Birmingham's conference centre.
New Labour's big day out, an immaculately prepared manifesto launch in Birmingham, featuring more money for health. And the Prime Minister visits the city's Queen Elizabeth Hospital. 4 years on, he's no vanity in achievement. He says, "We reject the quiet life." Lucky that, because he's about to hear those lethal words. Can I ask you a question, please?
I'd like to know what your Labour government are going to do. My partner has cancer.
He's got lymphatic cancer. They've had a hellish time, and Sharon Storer is at boiling point.
He couldn't get a bed on his own ward, which is the bone marrow transplant unit, and he had a terrible evening. We've had a very distressful 24 hours. So what are you going to do? The staff is absolutely incredible on the ward. They can't do enough for the patients, and then he has to be referred down to an A&E unit, which was absolutely diabolical.
Sorry about the situation.
No, you're not very sorry, because if you was, you would do something about it. They're understaffed, they've got terrible facilities, the toilets are appalling, and you're just not giving them the money to make the facilities better for them. You are definitely not. All you do is walk around and make yourself known, but you don't actually do anything to help anybody.
What I'm visiting here now is the extra investment we're putting in, not just into cancer services, but into heart service as well. Now, I know it takes some time. Of course it takes time to get the staff
He has
that we
had
need.
an absolute horrendous 4
I
hours,
appreciate
and
that.
it has made him far worse. So what are you going to do about that? Yes, you're going to do something, can't you? But you're not, because you won't.
If I could just explain to you what I am doing.
Okay.
He'd had more chance to explain what he was going to do earlier at the manifesto launch. There, the cabinet, a silent backdrop, had heard a frank admission that people are frustrated by the slow speed of change so far.
We know how much there still needs to be done. We understand that for a pensioner still waiting for an operation, or the family who's just been burgled, or the mother worried about the quality of her child's school, change simply cannot come fast enough.
A lot has improved, he insisted, but everyone knows the big investments haven't yet arrived. Mr. Blair's core message was that when they do, so will tough reforms, using any means necessary to improve services. Private managers in the NHS, a big upheaval in comprehensive schools, ideas disliked by Labour traditionalists.
Money alone is not enough. That is why we are also committed to fundamental reform in public services. There should be no barriers, no dogma, no vested interest that stand in the way of delivering the very best services for our people.
This was a manifesto of a hyperactive government still hungry for power. But Tony Blair's repeated message in recent days is to emphasise that he knows, like the rest of the country, that he hasn't transformed things yet.
As long as there is one child in poverty, one pensioner in poverty, one person denied their chance in life, this is one Prime Minister and one party who will have no rest, no vanity in achievement, no sense of mission completed, until those people are given the hope they deserve.
But all the careful presentation of that message was knocked aside by the unexpected and the unplanned. Labour's Millbank headquarters had intended today to be entirely different. A day when we focused on the detail of a meaty manifesto. But the election campaigns are about confrontations on the street and scuffles and arguments as much as about detailed paragraphs and spending plans. General election campaigns would be much smoother and easier to organise if it wasn't for members of the public. Andrew Marr, BBC News, outside Labour's Millbank headquarters.
Joining us now, our political correspondent, Philippa Thomas. Philippa, the Labour Party must have wanted the manifesto on the front pages tomorrow, but a raw egg, and John Prescott's put paid to that.
It has rather. As Andy was saying, this is what Labour wanted you to see. The manifesto, ambitions for Britain. The planning that went into this manifesto was immense. And of course, it all came to nothing because instead we have, for example, The Sun, two jabs Prescott there, and the Daily Mail has it again. The two Jags floor show, and I could show you all the papers. Prescott punches a protester, says The Telegraph. Angry voters spoil Labour's big day, says The Independent, and that wobbly Wednesday again. And The Guardian, the Prescott punch-up. The visit to the seaside turns rather ugly. So massive full-colour pictures of John Prescott on the floor after a violent scuffle instead of a beaming visionary Tony Blair.
And tomorrow one can imagine the Conservatives saying, well, hang on, here we have a government who want to end the yob culture, and yet the Deputy Prime Minister takes a swing at someone.
Well, of course, it depends on how you see these pictures. Was he acting in legitimate self-defence because the egg thrown at him hit him so hard it felt like a punch in the face? That's what Labour's saying to us behind the scenes. Or was it loutish behaviour? Did he just instinctively lash out as soon as somebody went for him? It's really a matter of interpretation from these pictures, but it doesn't look good. It's extremely embarrassing for Labour tonight.
Now, let's move on to another aspect of the election story, Philippa. The Financial Times, in its first edition, is apparently saying that they have got Oliver Letwin admitting that he was the source, the anonymous source, previously anonymous source, saying we will cut tax by £20 billion.
That's right, and there's been an instant reaction from Labour there saying this completely blows apart the Conservatives' credibility, because we have it on the record now that whereas they're telling the public they want £8 billion worth of tax cuts, in fact they're talking about 20 billion. That's got to mean slashing public services. However, I think it's really hard to outdo the impact of the Prescott scuffle and what happened to Tony Blair yesterday. So I don't think this is going to be top of the news agenda, but it is something that Labour will push at, saying that the Conservatives are basically all over the place when it comes to their tax and spending plans.
Just going back briefly, Philippa, to that very stage-managed launch of the manifesto today, is it your sense tonight that the Labour Party tomorrow will try to rise above the events of this evening and earlier today because they don't have any other choice?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're already saying, as far as the Prescott incident is concerned, well, a man has been arrested, he's been taken in for questioning. Obviously, it's a matter for the police now. This cannot be political. They're trying to be terribly proper about it and put it neatly to one side and say, let's get on with the real business, which is giving the voters what they want. Of course, what you could say about both the Prescott and Blair incidents today is that in some way both show that there are angry members of the public, whether it's over health, whether it happens to be over the countryside or farming or other fuel protests, that there is public anger that's coming through and that has obviously taken ministers by surprise. So really should have been Labour's big splashy day, the most positive day you could have for Labour, and it's completely thrown them back on the defensive.
Now, when you talk about Tony Blair's day, Philippa, when you talk about anger and that incident today, is it your feeling that that woman heckling Tony Blair outside, well, giving her a hard time outside the Birmingham hospital, will be one of the images of the election campaign that people really remember?
Oh, I think so. It's hard to see how things could become more spontaneous than this. I mean, when we first saw all those pictures coming in, when we first saw the dialogue, everybody I know in Westminster today just stopped and was transfixed. You do not have such raw drama unfolding in today's politics. It is usually stage managed. Labour, of course, is trying to turn this to their advantage in a way, saying, well, she was talking about public services. That's exactly what Tony Blair is saying he's talking about. He wants to improve things. It's our agenda, not the Tories' agenda. But it is difficult to get away from the point of view that this has been a very negative day for the Prime Minister and his team.
Philippa, thanks a lot. Well, William Hague has said that Tony Blair is asking for a second chance after failing to deliver on any of his party promises. He told supporters at a rally in Warwickshire that the Conservatives could win the election.
William Hague lost no time in capitalising on the Prime Minister's hospital confrontation. Talking to Conservative Party workers near Coventry tonight, he said it showed how Labour had failed to deliver.
And as Tony Blair discovered in Birmingham today, careful choreography and planted questions cannot shield him from the anger of ordinary voters. The people I meet, people who've been let down, people who now know better than to fall for his meaningless promises and stealth taxes all over again.
Why don't you drop the racist from the Tory
Earlier, the Tory leader had run into a spot of bother himself. His walkabout in Wolverhampton was interrupted by hecklers. Instead of the scheduled 20 minutes, the visit lasted only 3, though party workers deny it was cut short. At least the Tories are allowing impressionist Rory Bremner to join their battle bus. Labour have banned him from theirs. He's been brushing up his impersonation of Mr Hague.
Well, I think I will be very strongly advising people. I'll be saying that after the next election I will be lowering the price of fuel. But that's fine, because after the next election I'll be working in a petrol station.
The Liberal Democrat leader was visiting hospitals in Somerset and Rochdale today, encouraged by an opinion poll showing an increase in his party's support. He says its pledge to boost health service spending by increasing the top rate of income tax for high earners was the honest approach.
And that's why we've been quite straight with people, saying we do want to invest more in the health service. It will cost a price, but with us, you know the price and you know the money will be raised fairly.
It's been a day when the sparks have truly been flying between politicians and voters, and a day that could be remembered as the one this election came alive over an issue that's so far dominating the campaign, the state of our public services and how we pay for them. John Andrew, BBC News, Westminster.
Some other news now. A former aide to the Duchess
this Saturday from 1:15.
So now on BBC One, live and uninterrupted coverage of Vote 2001 with David Dimbleby.
Good evening and welcome to election night at the BBC. The people have spoken and our job now is to find out what they've said as quickly as we can. Not just the obvious question, who goes to number 10 and with what majority, but what happens to the various parties, what the fate of their leaders is, and perhaps just as interesting, why people who chose to vote voted the way they did. There are 659 different constituencies in the United Kingdom, 659 separate races, and we'll be at all the most exciting.
The group of runners behind me might just be record breakers because they're amongst 90 people who are hoping that Sunderland South might achieve the hat-trick and be the first in the country to declare within 46 minutes.
Torbay, the country's most marginal seat and the Tories' top target. It's vital for them to win it back from the Lib Dems, but will Labour supporters vote tactically to keep them out?
And what will happen to the man who went from being Mr Blair's closest cabinet colleague to the humble MP for Hartlepool? We're here tonight to see whether the voters want Peter Mandelson back in Parliament.
Were you still up for Portillo back in 1997? This was the seat and the shock of the night, where Labour newcomer Stephen Twigg ousted Michael Portillo.
The Conservatives' new face in Henley is Boris Johnson, taking over from Michael Heseltine. He's a well-known media figure and political journalist, and he's tipped as one of the Tories' brightest newcomers. We'll get his views on tonight's events.
And here in the studio, Peter Snow will be telling the story with his latest wizardry.
Yes, David, we'll have all sorts of colourful ways of illustrating this election. None, of course, more spectacular than our swingometer. But this time, for the first time in history, we're going to bring it down off its wall and lay it right down here on the studio in front of us. And it won't this time be a pendulum that moves among the MPs, scything them up and down. It'll be a laser beam, zapping them from blue to red and red to blue. Welcome to our laser swingometer. And this is the way we'll be judging the success or failure of William Hague and his Conservative Party in climbing the staircase to power. We're going to lay in front of him all his opponent's seats that he has to colour from their colours to blue for Conservative if he's to attain an overall majority. How high up the staircase will he get? Because if he gets to the top and opens the door to number 10, then he'll have a post-war record for recovery. But supposing it goes the other way, and it's Labour who are making the gains, turning the map even redder than it was last time, and turning what was then a landslide into a super landslide. It's going to be a very exciting night.
But it won't all be facts and figures, exciting though those are. They're also human stories from politicians and voters. Above me there, talking to them, Fiona Bruce and Jeremy Paxman.
Over the next few hours, I'll be joined by a succession of winners and losers, members of the cabinet, members of the shadow cabinet, delighted new MPs, disillusioned old veterans heading for the dustbin of history. Our job up here is to try to find out why the election was won and lost. Fiona.
This election has been made by ordinary people, sweeping away the spin and challenging the party leaders out on the streets. They've come in to talk to me while we wait for the results to come through. Celebrities have been used by the politicians to get their message across, and some of them will be keeping me company throughout the night. And just to inject an element of humour, comedians and cartoonists who've tickled us during the campaign will be keeping us amused.
As ever, much depends tonight on the work done in our back room. There, receiving the results and analysing them, are statisticians and psephologists practising their black arts. And joining me here at the table are three wise people, Alison Park, Professor Anthony King, and the BBC's political editor, Andrew Marr. Now, they're going to be interpreting this election, comparing it with elections past, describing the battles to come. And once Big Ben strikes 10 and the last vote is cast, we'll have our exit poll predicting the result. The famous exit poll, the last poll of the election, sometimes right, sometimes not quite so right. NOP this time have asked 18,000 voters in constituencies across the country to fill in a simulated ballot paper outside the polling station just after they've voted. And fingers crossed, if they've been filled in truthfully, we won't have egg on our faces when the real results start coming through in 3/4 of an hour. And our exit poll says another Labour landslide. Tony Blair has won that second full term for Labour that was always his ambition. We are saying a Labour majority of around 160. It could be a bit either side of that. It could even be above the 179 that they had last time. And the news is reaching the three-party headquarters there. On the top left, as you can readily imagine, Trimdon Labour Club in Sedgefield, On the right, shaking their heads a little bit in disbelief, are the Tories in the Roman Golf Club at Richmond. And at the bottom, the Liberal Democrats at Pizza on the Park near Hyde Park Corner in London. Well, that's their first reactions, but let's now find out exactly how this exit poll came about, what it actually says about the percentage of the vote. Peter.
David, we talked about 18,000 people, and here's what they told us. The share of the vote. And if you think this looks awfully like that staggering Labour success in 1997, you'd be very right. 44% the Labour Party, 32% the Conservative Party, 17% the Liberal Democrats, and 6% the others. And the change that represents on the last general election, that triumph for Labour, don't forget, in 1997, Labour staying almost exactly where they were, the Tories up by just 1%, the Liberal Democrats no change, and the others down 1%. Now, let's take that over to our swingometer over here, our laser beam swingometer. Here is the Conservative Party over here. There is the laser beam in the middle. If there's no swing at all from last time, then it'd be a majority of about 179 for Labour. If there's a swing to Labour, then look at all these blue Conservative MPs being zapped by our laser beam. If it's a swing to the Conservatives, then they want an 11.5% swing, a huge swing for an overall majority over here before they get a majority of 1. But our exit poll suggests that the swing to the Conservatives is a small one of just 0.5%. A 0.5%, pointing to a slightly smaller majority than 179, as we said. And that would endanger people like, for example, Stephen Twigg. Here he is in Enfield Southgate. If you remember, he's the person who took the seat from Michael Portillo in the middle of the last election programme. And so he could be in danger if the swing's a little bit more than that. Of course, the swing will drop either side of this, and we don't know very well at all what's going to happen to the Lib Dems. They have very independent, exciting battles between themselves and the Tories. We can't be sure about them. But on the whole, then, another huge Labour majority, perhaps a little less than the last one, David.
Peter, thank you very much.
Britain wakes up to an historic second term of Labour government. But what now for the Conservatives?
For 100 years, we've been in government for short periods of time, but never won a full successive second term of office. Now we have.
Good morning and welcome to Breakfast from BBC News with Jeremy Bowen and Sophie Rayworth. The headlines this morning, it's another landslide for Labour.
Tony Blair is back in Downing Street with an expected majority of 167, the biggest ever achieved by a governing party.
William Hague described the result as deeply disappointing for the Tories.
Charles Kennedy's Liberal Democrats get their highest number of seats since 1929.
But turnout is the lowest since 1918. Tony Blair has won an historic second term in office with another landslide majority. With some results still outstanding, the projected results show Labour being returned to power with a majority of 167, just 10 less than 4 years ago. Labour has won 412 seats, the Tories 160 so far, a gain of just 1 seat, and the Liberal Democrats 46, an increase of 6. Labour's share of the vote is around 43%, the Conservatives 33%, and the Liberal Democrats 19%. But the turnout was the worst since 1918. Only around 59% of people turned out to vote.
This morning we'll be analysing the results, talking to leading figures in the main parties and bringing you election news from your area. But first, this report from Breakfast's political correspondent.
If you have been affected by this program, help is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call, free, anytime, 116 123, or email joe@samaritans.org. At FJBA UK, we support Samaritans and their volunteers round-the-clock work, listening to people in need of somebody to talk to. However, there really hasn't been anything in this program to affect anybody. So, if you have been upset over anything, then get a fucking life.